You're watching In the Market here on AM Live. Today we turn our focus on genetically modified organisms, where we know that genetically modified food has been contentious, starting with the ban on GMOs in 2012 after a task force formed by the then Minister for Public Health, Beth Mugo, concluded that GMOs weren't fit for human consumption. The task force based its decision on a study that linked the crops to cancer in maize, but the International Scientific Journal, which had published the findings of that study, retracted it, prompting GMO proponents to call for the lifting of the ban. Another task was formed to look into the safety of genetically modified foods, submitted its report to Parliament in 2015. It recommended lifting the ban on a case-by-case basis and called for the importation of genetically modified food in times of crisis, but under advice of the National Biosafety Authority. Last year, Cabinet Secretary for Health, Dr. Cleopa Mailu, who is a former right now, turned down applications by scientists to conduct field trials for genetically modified maize. The environmental watchdog NEMA also jumped into the fray and said that experimental designs for genetically modified maize would have to be tested before licenses for field trials were issued to ascertain the safety of the entire process. And of course, looking at today's Daily Nation, we're wondering and asking this question, of course, will the GMOs maize also be a prime solution to food insecurity? And of course, the armyworm. This is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. And it says that voracious pest already eating its way through farms at the coast, Rift Valley, Western and Central in what could turn out to be another year of shortages and high food prices. The story is tucked away on page 2 of the Daily Nation. On top there, the flag reads food security. U.S. agency warns of impending disaster on the farm. And we have facts about armyworm as well. The fall of armyworm originated in the U.S., first sighted in Kenya in 2016 in maize-producing counties. Also, the larva is the most destructive stage of the formation. The worms cause severe leaf damage and injuries to maize ears in nearly all the stages of crop development. Also high resistance to pesticides in later stages of their development. There is no data from the Ministry of Agriculture on their devastation by the fall army, and its destructive habit is made worse by the fact that it feeds during the day and at night. And we have our guests already in studio with us today to take us through this particular discussion that we'll be having this morning. And I already mentioned that you can also call in, ask questions, or share your contributions. We have with us Wanjiku Kamau. She's a policy advisor, Kenya Organic Agriculture Network. Also, we do have with us Dr. Richard Oduor, who's the head of Plant Transformation Laboratory from Kenyatta University. Also, we do have with us Dr. Joel Ochieng, who is the Secretary General, Kenya University Biotech Consortium. Good morning, gentlemen and lady. Right, so looking at the Daily Nation today, hunger worm threatens half of Kenya's maize. What will be your reaction? Let's begin with you, Dr. Joel.
Well, this already shows that we have to solve the problem, because we are talking about looming and serious hunger in the coming months. And this is despite government assurance through the Ministry of Agriculture that we had enough reserves to take us another 1 year. But that is not the case anymore. In fact, even right now, as we talk, we are talking about, there's talk about overproduction, but which is actually not the case. I think sometimes we report things that are not factual because the ministry does not have adequate data. So we are talking about a situation where in the coming months, there will be very limited harvest. And so we'll go back to the same cycle of importation and food scarcity. You know, when you talk about maize, you're talking about food. Food security is almost equated to maize availability in Kenya, because I think it's one of the largest type of foods. So we have to solve the problem, and we have the means to do so. But that means has been scuttled in some way, not by the government, I would be very plain, but by a section of the government. The president himself has pledged the big four, and one of them is technology used in agricultural systems.
Yes.
So we're talking about a few individuals who choose to scuttle these efforts. And the earlier this matter is sorted out, the better. But we'll be discussing that more into detail about GMO.
All right. And of course, we know, according to the National Assembly's Agriculture Committee research, which is aimed at releasing locally produced GMOs to the market, GMOs will improve food security.
Yes, they will, because there are two issues. One, it can be used for infusing some micronutrients that are lacking. It is also used to reduce pest damage. When you reduce pest damage, it means you are increasing your harvests. And so we're talking about food security improvement through that technology. So it would.
It would?
Yes.
All right, let's see.
It would and has.
And has?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear from Professor Okoth.
Thank you, Debarl. And if you wake up in the morning and you pick a newspaper from one of the leading, paper production agencies like Nation, and one thing you see is a prediction on hunger, surely from where I sit, one thing that the relevant authorities and the media has done so well in this country is to predict catastrophes like this. And hunger is here, and surely it will happen. Now, that is incumbent upon us now to start thinking very strategically on ways of reverting this, because it will happen. And I agree with Joel that we have technologies that we can use. Biotechnology is just one of them, but very critical on this one, because as we are talking right now, there are emerging information now, actually, that the BT, has effect on the armyworm. So if we continue discussing this matter, we will get deeper into this and try to explain how some of these things we're talking about, especially biotechnology, the GMO-related ones, how they can really help in solving this problem.
All right. So if we may get also a perception from Wanjiku just to tell us, of course, you are not a proponent of a GMO. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Debarl, for having us. Once again, we're in the midst of probably an impending hunger.
Yes.
And we are boxing ourselves or locking ourselves into one solution. I think we need to look outside the box and really understand why we are in the situation we are in now. And one of the reasons we are in this situation is that we have focused too much on maize as a staple crop. We have a lot of other foods rich in biodiversity, the sorghums, the millets,
yes,
the pumpkins that we can use to ensure our food security. So one of the things we need to start really thinking about as we move outside of this, beyond this situation, is that what can we do to make our food more diverse and reduce this over-reliance on maize. But again, the current situation we find ourselves with pest resistance and disease vulnerability,
yes,
is because of the focus on a narrow range of crops, again maize, and continuous. We avoid the good agricultural practices of crop rotation, increased biodiversity, which is making us very, very vulnerable when maize is attacked by a disease. Again, we are moving, with the green revolution, we are focusing a lot on uniform seeds, uniformity, rather than biodiversity. And this challenge we're having now with the fall armyworm, and we had it earlier, a few years ago, with the maize lethal necrosis, is because of this focus on uniform seed. We need to move away from this uniformity of seed and be more diverse in our food systems and more diverse in what we grow for food security. And as long as we are focused on a few range of a few crops and a few seed, particularly hybrid seed, we are going to forever find ourselves in this situation. But again, I feel we are creating an alarmist situation. We have been seeing in the media, because the media is picking up on this, farmers in Wasingishu and the bread basket lining up with lorries of maize, and that the NCPB cannot absorb. So I don't think we have a situation of impeding hunger immediately. Maybe later in the year or next year there could be a risk. But I think if we focus on other crops and integrated food systems, we can get out of this without too much loss in terms of lives.
So what do you think is on the front page of the Daily Nation is not really alarming to you?
For me, it's not alarming, because I think with the immediate future. We have enough food. If what we are seeing in the media with farmers lining up outside NCPB with their maize and NCPB not absorbing it, I think we still have enough food for a couple of months. But I think we need to start thinking, what can we blend our maize with that gives us increased nutrition, but also helps us move away from over-reliance on maize.
Over-reliance on maize.
Oh, we are over-relying on maize, and as long as we do this, we are going to forever be vulnerable to this kind of shocks with climate change coming up, with increased pest and disease vulnerability.
All right, but we know also there is a group of parliamentarians and of course government officials they've gone to Brazil right now to try and you know, sort of study what Brazilians are doing and what the South Americans are doing in terms of coming or trying to fight the armyworm menace that we do have. So from your own estimation, you don't think that armyworm is a threat to food security in this country?
I do think it's a threat.
It's a threat.
But it's not an immediate threat. And our focus should not be on technology alone. We need to embrace many diverse solutions to it. And one of the solutions I feel is important going forward is that we need to find how do we stop this over-reliance on maize by integrating other foods, which we have lots of in terms of millet, sorghums, pumpkins. We have lots of those things available. The other thing I think, we need to look at our seed. With the liberalization of the seed market, we get seed from all over the world. A lot of our seed is coming from other countries, primarily like South Africa. How is this seed from other parts of the world increasing our vulnerability to diseases? Earlier we had MLND, and now we have armyworm, all of which have been imported into Kenya. So how can we use our own good seed? We have a lot of traditional indigenous seed that is doing very, very well, and many of them are resilient to some of these shocks.
So the invasion of armyworms actually was, you know, imported into the country through these seedlings that you're talking about.
The seeds,
right?
yes.
The seeds actually, is that we're having this particular menace, right? So, yeah, talk to us a bit about what Wanjiku is saying.
Yeah, I think first I may respond a little. You know, Wanjiku is my friend. She knows very well, first, that the maize rejection, or whatever is called rejection at NCPB, is not because there's a glut. It is not because there's overproduction. No. We all know, and she knows that it's an issue of grain quality. You know, NCPB, just like any other grain handling situations, stick to certain quality requirements. So it may be misreported to make the government look bad that has rejected maize from farmers, but really the issue is the quality. For example, the moisture content, shriveled maize versus all other quality assurances. So that's one. And two, biodiversity is a very good thing. I'm actually an expert in genetics, and I encourage biodiversity because it connotes resilience. But on the other hand, we must realize that even without GMO, there is what we call continuous selection for traits that are desired by humans. And for that reason, biodiversity is always reduced through continuous selection, whether it's hybrid maize or any other qualities that we desire. Now, I don't think it is correct to say that the maize virus was imported from the US. Viruses are all over the world. They're everywhere, whether they're maize viruses or any other viruses. You find them in an environment, and you have cases to assure of phytosanitary issues when maize or any other grain enters the country. So unless CAFEs failed, which I don't think is true, viruses are in Africa. They're in Kenya, they're in the US, they're everywhere. And they keep mutating all the time, they change. So we had viruses here, but they may not have attacked the maize in the past. Or maybe they did, but it wasn't detected. So I think we must embrace the fact that it is through advanced technologies that we came to know about the virus on maize. Not because it wasn't there. Just like cancer. Cancer is a recent innovation that we came to know this thing is called cancer. Otherwise, people of the old communities used to call it something else, just because the technologies for detecting it were not there. So those are responses to her. But now I wanted to address the issue that we are discussing, that we have, now you've seen the Ministry of Agriculture saying that they have enough stock of spray as one of the ways that we're using to battle the pest.
Yes.
Now, the same item, the active ingredient in that spray, is what we are infusing in that plant or in the maize. so that it's fully protected from the pest. So that one, the farmer does not spend enormous resources in spraying, and two, so that we protect the environment. Because sprays are actually detrimental to the environment when you spray all over the place. We are using a safe technology of infusing a gene made from the same spray, because it's called BT. Most of those sprays are BT ingredients. We are using that same BT, because by the government using it to spray, it means they're accepting it is safe. So I don't understand what the hula baloo is about. If you're using the same item, but infusing it in a different way, a safer way than spraying it, I think that's something that we need to embrace. Now, when you talk about diversifying from maize to other crops, we must understand this pest does not feed only on maize. It's a grain borer. It feeds on foliage, on the stalk. It will feed on other of those items that we will move to. Because insects normally they learn new crops. There's no insect that will stand there and wait to die just because there's no maize. They will learn and ravage on the other ones. So I think as much as biodiversity is important, and Wanjiku is right that we need to diversify our foods, even as an expert in nutrition, we can accept that we need to diversify. But that diversification will not stop the pest from ravaging the new crops. We have to solve the problem in a comprehensive manner. Yes.
All right, let's hear from Professor Oduor.
Thank you, Debarl. And when I listen to Wanjiku talk, I usually enjoy her thinking, especially in diversity and in local seeds and keeping it traditional. And I'm really, Joel has already hinted to it, that unfortunately this armyworm has a large appetite for several other foods, including sorghum, millet, and all that. So it is true that even if we diversify to sorghum, we won't get it there because it will also be consumed. But taking back you back to the thinking around the local seeds and traditional, there is this thinking that when you go biotech crops, you are not taking into account the local qualities, which is really wrong, because even when you improve these crops genetically, you're still taking on some of the traits from the traditional actually germplasm.
Yes.
So it is true, some of the good traits that probably Wanjiku is talking about, we don't lose them. We actually just improve on that which is already there. But also, even talking about the local seeds and even developing them for our local use, what other technologies are there that will really deviate from biotech itself? Even food preservation will require the biotechnology in this. Even when it comes to breeding for hybrids, which is acceptable, and Wanjiku will tell you that hybrids are acceptable. That is also biotechnology, and therefore some of these notions out there about GM and biotech, and exclusively thinking that biotech is only GM and all that is unfortunate. And the discussions in this country have always been talking about biotech and thinking GM. And GM is one of that precise way of developing some of these improved germplasm. And we can go deeper in this discussion going forward. So my only advice would be that yes, let's diversify, that's fine, but unfortunately even the diversity that we are crying to have will also very soon be caught up in this catastrophe of armyworm and other diseases, because some of them attack maize, they will attack sorghum, they will go in sweet potato and all this. So the diseases have a large appetite for different hosts and also pests at the same time. So we must start thinking about technologies that cut across. And biotech has this unique ability that you can use it in maize, sorghum, beans, potato, rice, using the same technology. And that is one of the reasons why we keep saying, let's objectively discuss biotechnology without really touching our emotions to it. Right. It's a good technology.
All right. Let's come back to you, Wanjiku, and ask you, of course, talking about so many issues about GMOs, we'll look at the health risk, we'll look at also the environmental risk, we'll look also at the trade risk, trade imbalance. Maybe that some people also argue that it might really bring to the market as well. But first of all, when we talk about health risk, do we have any evidentiary study that yes, GMOs, they cause certain, or maybe they have this proclivity on causing cancer as we have established maybe from the intro as well, it was done on mice, and then that particular study was also retracted as well. What sort of studies do we, or you can quote for us, against, making a case against GMOs?
Well, there's been a lot of studies, and perhaps the Seralini study is the most famous. And I think I want to correct the myth that the Seralini study was completely done away with. What happened? It was retracted. It was removed from the initial journal. It was published, but published in another equally reputable journal, and nothing changed.
So what was the rhyme or reason of actually retracting it from the previous journal?
So what we have had around the retraction is that a person who was in the editorial committee for that particular institution where it was first published had prior interactions with one of the leading biotech companies, and therefore there was a lot of pressure on Seralini to retract that publication from that particular journal. But when it was republished, there was no change in his findings. It was actually correct. His findings were actually correct, and he recently published similar follow-up studies, and he found that yes, this variety of maize has can cause cancer. But one of the challenges we have we've challenged our scientists in Kenya. Fine, there's been a lot of mud thrown on the Seralini study, but we've challenged our scientists. If you are not confident about the methodologies that Seralini used in his study, which was published in 2012, why hasn't any of the studies, why haven't the Kenyan scientists published any studies around GMOs and the health impact in our context? And one of the things that I pick up, Debarl, from the Seralini study is that only 30% of the feed that was fed to the rats was GM material. The rest 70% was non-GM material. If we are going to open up our borders or our country to GM maize, we are going to be feeding on 100% of GM maize. Because maize is our staple food. So if 30% maize can cause the impacts we saw from the Seralini study that contributed to the GM ban in 2012, who is doing studies on Kenyans feeding, or rats being fed 100% GM material? Who is bothering to do that? We haven't got anyone in Kenya, and I stand to be corrected by Dr. here, whether they've done any studies in Kenya feeding these rats, this particular variety of rats, 100% of GM material, and then they publish this material publicly for all of us to interrogate. They had I stand to be corrected, no one has done that study. So as far as I'm concerned, we can only go with Seralini study that said that GM maize, particularly of this variety NK603, this event, showed impacts on related to cancer on rats.
All right. Yeah. She raises a very good question, maybe to you. You, as a scientist yourself, have you done any study to establish what we know, that yes, this particular GMOs, maybe we can attribute a lot of the cancer burden that we have in this country to its maybe emanating from the GMOs that we take in as citizens?
No, I think
and environmental pollution as well.
Let me answer that in a scientific manner, because scientists have to have a reasonable argument. One is that the rats that were used by Seralini are rats that were developed by cancer research groups. So they are predisposed to develop tumors after some time. So to begin with, Seralini used the wrong rats. And if I repeat the experiment, or anybody does the same, you will get tumors, even if fed on non-GM. In fact, Wanjiku is aware that Seralini's rats that were fed on control, that is ordinary maize that was not GM, also developed tumors. Whatever is called cancer. Cancer and tumor are different things. But for argument's sake, let's call it cancer. So rats that are fed on non-GM maize develop cancer. And Wanjiku is aware of that. Now, two, is that Seralini published his work in that journal. It was withdrawn or retracted.
Yes.
Then he republished it in another one called Environmental Sciences Europe, which Wanjiku is aware of. Now, what Wanjiku is failing to tell you, but which is aware of, is that there was a very clear caveat. Caveat means it's a caution in that same journal, Environmental Sciences Europe, stating at the beginning that we are not republishing this work because we agree to the content, but we are publishing it to archive it so that people all over the world can learn from mistakes that Seralini made. It's very clear in English, basic English. Now, the third issue about the same is that Seralini himself, without any duress, has published a follow-up in another journal of the highest standing compared to the previous two, called PLOS ONE. And Wanjiku can attest to the fact that PLOS ONE is even higher than the other two. Now, this time Seralini says, in his own wordings, and without duress, that I've realized that the tumors that we observed in our earlier publication was not emanating from GMO, but from environmental toxins in the feed. Environmental toxins in the feed that was used in the previous experiments. And that's appearing very prominently in the first pages of his publication in a higher journal. So that's one. So we have issues that I've clarified about Seralini. Now let me go to other things. Perhaps Wanjiku will respond to that later. We have WHO, I'm not sure how much she respects WHO, doing studies to indicate that mouthwash, the one we use daily like Colgate, I said like Colgate, I'm not saying Colgate is the only one, have effects and have been proven to cause cancer. We have Johnson's baby powder, which has been proven to cause cancer, and 2 women paid more than $7 million US last year. 2 different women, because they used Johnson's baby powder for oral hygiene. They went to court because they developed cancer. They sued Johnson's company, and they were paid $7 million US each.
Baby powder for oral hygiene?
Yeah, well, women use it for oral hygiene.
Topical.
They use it for hygiene.
Oh, okay.
They use baby powder.
Baby powder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they use
okay.
it. So now, those lawsuits succeeded. They were paid the money. Now, what I'm wondering, and to go back to Seralini a little, and we all know that because we read widely. Seralini said the tumors, that is in 2012, the initial publication, that the tumors were not emanating from GMO itself, but from the glyphosate, whatever we call Roundup Ready, the herbicide. That was the source of the tumors. And the herbicides are used in Kenya on non-GM fields, on ordinary maize, to do weeding, because we use it just before planting, so that all the weeds die and the maize remains standing. That was the purpose of developing the Roundup. It was not meant for non-GM, it was meant for GM fields only. But we use it in Kenya, we abuse it, let me call it. Now, if we can have the same chemical that was accused by Seralini for causing tumors, because he said GM maize, but the underlying issue with that GM maize was the Roundup itself. That's the one that he claimed caused mitochondrial changes, aromatase. That is a technical term. So, Wanjiku has never complained about Roundup, which is used in Kenya today. Wanjiku has never complained about mouthwash. She has never complained about Johnson's baby powder, which as a woman I'm sure she uses. So we're just wondering, is GM debate about trade wars, or is GM debate an issue of true safety fear?
Yeah.
Because if it's a safety fear, then these 3 items and many others would be an issue.
All right, we look at the safety fear, we continue with it. Let's hear from Oduor.
Debarl, when as scientists, what we do is that, and Wanjiku said that she's challenging actually local scientists, why haven't we done this? Interestingly, Debarl, how it works in the academic world, had this paper not been retracted, I can tell you we would have done even 4 or 5 of the same. Usually in academia, actually the act of retracting a paper is very demeaning to a serious scholar. And from our point of view, the reasons for its withdrawal was, the reasons were very, very valid. Now, from where we sit as scientists, especially those dealing with this biotech, we have decided that, and this is what Wanjiku probably is not saying, is that before you release these GM products or biotech products, into the market. There are rigorous, very well organized toxicological, analyses that include, actually, holistically, we can even call them compositional analysis, where you have to check on, does it still contain the same nutrients compared to the non-GM? Does it trigger, any toxicological, effect? Does it actually provoke any allergenicity? Because those are concerns that are usually there. And there is a very nice outline on what are the kind of experiments that you must do before you release this. And that's why, if the paper was retracted, and for the really genuine reasons, and Joel has highlighted a few of them, even apart from that, even the numbers that were used, the size of the tumor, the animal, the animal rights will tell you that the size of those tumors were actually supposed to be subjected to serious disciplinary, thinking around that. But for us, we are saying that, and the government has listened to this, and I think is now trying to ignore this. Because even as we are talking, there are a lot of research that currently are funded in my lab by NRF,
yes,
to develop actually GM drought-tolerant sweet potato.
Yes.
Right now, we are actually advancing our locally developed, GM maize against, drought stress, and many others. Now, actually, about cancer that everybody keeps talking about, I think the government is realizing that we have spent a lot of time actually talking about GM, and almost people think that GM is the only is the cause of cancer, which is not true. As we are talking right now, and I have funding that the government has actually already disbursed to try and understand whether some of the, ionizing radiation, because we live in houses where we have got stones, and whether these stones could be emitting some levels of ionizing radiation. Could this be the cause? Meaning that actually we are now moving away from this small thinking around GMO and cancer, and start attacking cancer as a menace. Because really, if we go the direction that it is GMO and cancer, then we are forgetting to look at the real causes of cancer, which are overly documented, and we really are supporting the government in this regard.
But we have also enough evidence, also people who are really against the GMOs. We can quote also the American Public Health Association and American Nurses Association, among the many medical groups that have condemned the use of GM, citing bovine growth hormone, because, for instance, the milk from treated cows has more of the hormone IGF-1, insulin like growth factor 1, which is linked to cancer. Yeah, we have also GMOs contaminate, of course, GMOs cross-pollinate, and this we'll discuss, and we've had even this discussion here. If I want to be an organic farmer, and you also on the other end raising crops that the seedlings are from GMOs, there's that sort of a seed contamination from GMOs. These are also factors that we need to talk about as well. So there are evidence here. So what you as Kenyans have you done? Because I think Parliament, the National Committee also had put you to task that we should not import these GMOs from without, but we can actually have our own homegrown solution as far as GMOs is concerned. What have you come up with so far? Let's first of all tackle with maize. Stop talking about the cotton, we'll come to that later, right? But let's just begin with maize.
Debarl, I think the scientists are taking in a lot of time. I think I would like to put in some comments.
Yes.
I wouldn't want us to get bogged down in the issue of the Seralini study. There are a lot of studies that have shown their risks with GM. But also, like Dr. says here, is that the technology also comes with other things, like the use of glyphosate. When the Seralini study was done, they tested the GM maize that is Roundup ready, meaning they will be using glyphosate as well as the impacts of glyphosate. So, and WHO has actually categorized glyphosate, which is Roundup, as a possible carcinogen. And therefore, even the fact that we are using glyphosate now as a weed killer needs to be interrogated, because could it be the reason why, if you go to farmers who are doing orchards like mangoes, even crops like maize, farmers are using glyphosate, indiscriminately to control weeds. So who has done any correlation to show the use of glyphosate, how is it interlinked with our health? And now that WHO has classified glyphosate as a possible carcinogen. But what I'm saying is GMOs are tied into other issues. For instance, if we allow GMOs, and you know, for purposes of, you know, the common, the normal Kenyan understanding, we are not against biotechnology. But genetically modified organisms or genetic engineering is where we have issues with, which is a small branch of, you know, biotechnology, and it involves, you know, adding or, you know, adding a gene that is not endemic in the particular organism. For instance, if it's cotton and maize, there's Bt, which is a bacteria normally found in the soil that has been integrated or put in the maize or cotton gene. But with that comes something else. There will be increased use of pesticides, particularly for secondary pests, if it's Bt cotton. There will be, and I was just looking at a study, you know, early this week that was done in Australia, where they discovered that no one who is doing research on how the roots below the ground, who is doing research on how the roots remove Bt toxin. And it was found by this study by Gupta and Stephanie Watson, yes, that the roots are actually, the small fiber roots under the ground produce more Bt toxin than the leaves that grow above the ground in cotton. And there is very little study on what the impacts on how this toxin removed in the roots of Bt cotton crops interact, you know, with the crop. For instance, it was shown that the leaves of young shoots of Bt cotton produce about 2,900 parts per billion of the Bt toxin, whereas the fine hairs of the roots under the ground are producing 7,000 parts per billion of Bt toxin. And these are interacting with the soil flora and fauna from when the crop is 2 weeks old going forward. Mm-hmm. So this kind of research is not coming out from our researchers. If you ask someone like Dr. Waturu, who's been involved in a lot in the Bt cotton research, when we ask him, what did you find out about the environmental impacts below the ground? He said there were no negative impacts, but these scientists in Australia are showing that the amount of toxins removed by Bt cotton below the ground are actually higher than the leaves above the ground. And scientists, so there's a lack of transparency, there's a lack of openness about this whole GM debate, and we think it's because there is an intellectual property rights and people stand to gain from royalties from the sale of seed. And that's the heart of the matter.
That is the heart of the matter. We'll want to also drill deeper, because we know, of course, there are big companies, big multinationals who they have this intellectual property, and of course they want, as she says, she raises a very good germane question. Of course, we want also to hear from our viewers who are, of course, on social media, and of course our numbers are up. You can call in, ask questions. You're a scientist. Of course, we want to also to engage on this particular discussion that we have this morning. Do you think also this will be the prime solution to, of course, the food security in the country? All right, looking at what is on the front page of a Daily Nation today, which is in tandem with what we're discussing this morning, we're wondering, could also this menace of armyworm be, of course, done away with GMO maize? And of course, there has been debate that has been rife in the country as far as GMOs are concerned. Health risks, they say. They're also talking about economic imbalance, of course, of trade. They have also vested interest from international multinationals when it comes to seedlings, that they want intellectual property, and of course they can ride on this particular genetic modified organisms as well. So you can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is the Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. Right. Let's see from...
I think I will agree with Wanjiku in one fact. I normally agree when facts are mentioned, that internationally and within Kenya and everywhere else, the issue about safety of GMO has been centered around the glyphosate, the one we call Roundup, which is a trade name. Even in the Seralini paper and other papers talking about safety have been centering around the glyphosate, not the process of GM making itself, but the Roundup that is accompanying it.
But I ask you I asked you a very pointed question. Yes, what homegrown solutions do we have as far as
we have a local? I wanted to clarify it, that the issue of safety is about Roundup, but the one we have in Kenya does not use Roundup and has completely nothing to do with Roundup. It is Bt maize. That's the local one. Bt maize, not Roundup maize, Roundup ready maize. All right, so it's made from Bt, which is a chemical. Bt is actually a bacterium.
For a layman like me, you know, it goes way over my head if you tell me Roundup maize and Bt. It doesn't make any lick of sense to me. Make me understand.
The difference is,
what is the difference?
The difference is that Roundup maize is one that is made GM but it withstands the weed, the herbicide. So it's used for weeding. The herbicide is used for weeding. You pour it over, the weeds all die, and the maize remains standing because it's Roundup tolerant. Now, BT maize is different. That is maize that has been modified using a harmless bacterium that is in the soil, every soil including yours. And the same bacterium used in making normal pesticide for spraying, even the one you saw somebody spraying today, is made from BT. And that is the same BT we are using for this one. So it is completely safe. And there's no issue about BT. Wanjiku cannot tell you a single study that shows BT is dangerous to humans. Yeah. Because we live with BT. We eat BT in our salads. So the issue is Roundup. I don't have evidence that Roundup actually causes cancer, but issues have been raised about it. And as long as I have no evidence either for or against, I will let Wanjiku carry argument. But the one we have here is BT. We don't have Roundup maize here in Kenya.
But the point of departure with you, Daktari, is that the BT found in maize is synthetic BT. It's not normal BT that is found naturally.
Of course.
The normal BT, the organic BT that we find in soil, the minute you expose the soil, it decomposes. Once it's exposed to sunlight, it decomposes immediately. But the synthetic BT that is integrated, that is genetically modified in the cotton and the maize, does not decompose. In fact, studies are showing that once the leaves, once you remove the cotton or the maize, you still find BT toxin even after 40% of the crop residue has decomposed. BT toxins are still found in the soil. So it's not the same as the natural BT. And I think scientists need not guide us, because the synthetic BT used in genetically modified crops is not the same as the natural BT found in soils. They are totally different.
Right, and of course,
for information,
yes, just a bit. Also, we want to don't keep silent. You can also
because
just.
I find this pretty interesting, and I'm almost beginning to think that Wanjiku just enjoys this debate for the sake of, just playing within her strength. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis. It exists in the soil. We have the section that has been picked from this normal soil-borne bacteria. It's just the section that, and helps to produce a protein that is, that some of these insects, temboras and these armyworms and many others, are susceptible to. There is no such thing like synthetic BT. There's no such thing, because and when you hear her start talking about patents and who owns the technology, let me tell you, Debarl, and these are open discussions.
All right.
Let's try the drug, discussions. You've heard about generic drugs, right?
Yes.
Generic drugs are drugs that are developed not because they're bad. It's just because a patent runs for 20 years. After the 20 years, any other person can go and use that technology. The first GM was in the market in 1996, 22 years from now. Actually, the BT technology is running off patent. Nothing stops Wanjiku, myself, and anybody else to go and make generics using this BT.
All right, but of course also the argument that is being advanced is like, for instance, when we talk about the BT cotton, the BT cotton is not for human consumption, isn't it? Right?
No, it is.
It is.
No, what happens is that 40% goes to clothing or lint. Yeah. But 60% of the income comes from seed.
Yeah. Seed, but what the ingesting, of course, is what we are.
The seed is used as edible oil.
Yes, for oil. Yes. But there has been also questions about this particular BT cotton also with the issue of biodiversity, where it really harms the biodiversity. Yeah. What she really raises is very good. And I want us also to drill deep on this, because BT cotton variety, they say that it harms the environment, destroying biodiversity through destruction of non-target organisms. For instance, when you talk about use of pollinators, insects, and also reported resistance, resulting in more stacked varieties and making them more expensive varieties, and therefore making seeds not affordable to family farmers.
Okay, now let me address that.
That has been another question. We can talk about small farmers, producers, and we have a case study of South Africa, big cotton, and also the big cotton maize failure. Why haven't you quoted this? You're aware about this particular failure in South Africa, beet cotton and a beet maize.
And Burkina Faso
as well.
Let me address that.
Right, welcome back. You're watching In the Market here on AM Live. Today we're discussing about GMOs And of course, we get to understand this particular debate about GMOs. Is it harmful, is it not? And the question we're asking you, in light of the food insecurity or security that we are talking about, do you think GMO maize is a prime solution to the armyworm menace? Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook. And 20505 is our SMS portal. Once more, do you think the GMO maize is a prime solution to the armyworm menace? Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. I have some of the tweets that have been sampled here for us so that you can just take a look at them and see what they're talking about. We have Nganga saying, hi, if we may just pick up that. GMOs could be a good way to alleviate food shortage in Kenya. However, it has been crowded with fears, risks and speculations. Also, we do have Anastasia Olembo. Australian government declined GMO. Why should Kenya accept it when other countries decline? Probing question there is. Also, we have Adhere Cavins. The GMO debate has been lost on facts and premised instead on human fears and speculation. We must strive to manage the harmful aspects while amplifying the benefits. That is what Adhere Cavins is talking about. Also, we have Jacob Abere Matlala saying GMO concept retraction isn't a solution. Panelists need to go deeper on it. Deeper on it, I should say. That going to market debate. Are they aware why colon cancer are eating citizens silently? So rats and rats can't hold. Just ask them why EU have restrictions on imports. Maybe this is also a good question that yes, our scientists will tell us why they do, and why. Who should be in Brazil scouting for solutions to address armyworm? Is it the legislators or technical persons who will learn firsthand and apply, disseminate the knowledge? That's another question also that is coming from our viewers. Right, so you can hit us on Twitter, continue. Our Twitter handle is also AM Live NTV, and our profile name on Facebook is name on Facebook is AM Live NTV. We have callers hanging on the line as well. John from Morero has a question for our panelists. Good morning, John. Good morning, John.
Yes.
Morning. You have a question or a contribution for our panelists this morning?
I have a contribution.
Please, sir. Go full steam ahead.
I have a contribution to make.
Yes.
First, I want to try and answer your question.
Yes, please.
Whether GMO is a solution for the poor armyworm.
Yes, please.
And I think my answer would be yes. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, continue. I can hear you. Continue.
Yes, your line is very noisy. I cannot, it's making a lot of noise.
What is making noise?
Your line. The line.
The line. But we can hear you clearly. You go full steam ahead. We can hear you clearly.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to start by saying that whether the GMO is a solution for the poor armyworm,
yes,
we need to see whether we have any other country that has eradicated this problem by growing GMO maize.
Okay.
Otherwise, without that, we need to have studies on the same, because without that, we might not be able to tell whether this is the solution.
Thank you.
About the poor armyworm,
yes,
I want to contribute and say this, that this pest is a caterpillar. I don't know why even it was called a worm. And what you realize is that one of the easiest pest control are caterpillars. But the problem that we are having is how we are trying to manage this pest with our farmers. I have visited many farmers.
Yes.
And I have observed how they are controlling this pest. First, they are waiting until they see the pest on the crop.
Yes.
And when they see this pest on the crop, they are running to each and every chemical without really knowing whether the chemical will control the pest or not. Everybody who is in agriculture knows very well that if you want to control a caterpillar, you cannot be able to control a caterpillar without using what we call IGR, insect growth regulators. But what our farmers are mainly using are knockdown chemicals. They just knock down the adult caterpillar, the adult caterpillar.
Yes.
But we have no business with the other stages of the caterpillar. First, we need to ask ourselves, where is this caterpillar pupating from? This is a very good question we need to ask ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, we need to ask ourselves, when we are controlling this forward war, what impact will it have in the next season?
Good question. Thank you. Thank you, John, there from Ruero. He raises very good questions and, of course, concerns as well as far as the insect group, is it growth regulator? Yes, IGR, and the knockdown effects or the knockdown chemicals on the pests as well. We shall discuss that as well. And we have another caller hanging on the line. Zablon is on the line. Good morning, Zablon from Meru. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You have a question or a contribution, sir?
I have a contribution and just to raise some comments.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've been listening to that debate and it's very healthy, especially during the time that we are struggling with the food insecurity and also the new technology emerging.
Yes.
Yeah, what has been disturbing me is about the introduction of the technology because we are not sure whether it has worked in any country at the moment. And I believe that any system needs to be replicated from successful places where it has been implemented.
Yes.
And I also want to commend the lady on the TV who has seen that the GMOs, there's some issues about the roots, the effect it causes.
Yes.
And those are kind of things that we need to be informed as consumers, so that while we understand the benefits of the GMO, we also need to be prepared about the risks involved.
Yes.
And even before it is implemented, all those things need to be exhausted, so that we don't rush to roll out the technology and then we realize that later on that we are creating bigger problems than the ones which have been existing. I know that there is an issue of intellectual property that people can rush to implement, but then it can have a fundamental effect on the country and the generations to come.
Thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, thanks for the debate. I'm still following up.
Thank you, Zablon from Meru. Thank you very much for your contribution as well. Remember, you can hit us on Twitter as well. We have a lot of tweets as well. We can read them much later. But if you have a question, also remember our numbers. They will still be on the screen for you to call in and ask questions as well. So we can actually respond to this before we continue with the conversation that we had before we took a short break. Can we get to answer some of these worries and concerns coming from, first of all, John and also Zablon as well? The issue of a country that has been successful. Could you quote one that you can hail as a success in terms of tackling armyworm using GMOs?
Yes. Now, I think that's a very good thing coming from people who seem to know. I think they sound to me like farmers because they seem to know about pests and its control. Now, talking about a country that has successfully controlled pests using GMO, we start with Brazil, where our MPs have now gone to. We have Canada, we have US, we have Australia.
Are they using GMOs? Because the understanding is they've gone there because the weather patterns are different with Kenya.
Yes.
And we know they have the summer and they have the winter as well. We don't have that, which is also, for them it is an advantage. When now it is, I don't know, when it is winter, is when now the armyworms actually, most of them, they taper off or they die.
Yes.
But when it is summer, they thrive a lot. Yes. So in terms of weather patterns, that has been also an advantage to the Southern Americas. Or you can tell us more about that. So is it about GMOs? Because I've not seen anywhere
it's about
GMO. They've quoted GMOs.
It's about GMO. The issue is we have, if you talk about a place like Australia,
yes,
you talk about a continent that has variable weather patterns. You could have winter in Victoria while you have summer in the North Coast. So we have those variations within the same state, if you call it. So the first thing to clarify is that GMO, I think we are really failing to unpack what it is. Genetic modification is normally conducted in a case-by-case basis and for very specific purposes. If you do modification to counter armyworm, it will not counter drought. It will be just for armyworm only. And it will be armyworm, not other pests. So GMO is target specific because we have something in it called receptor. I don't know whether Oduor can explain what a receptor is in other language.
Yes.
You only modify in a way that targets the receptor. in that pest, the specific pest. If it's about butterflies, it will be only killing butterfly of a specific species, not all butterflies, and not bees, and not people, not human beings. So it's target specific. This is what we need to understand. Yeah. So if we have Bt maize, it is not just Bt to kill everything else. It is to kill a specific menace. If it is armyworm, it's just armyworm. So we are talking about countries that have done that, and but then there is a confusion about GMO. We use a balkanized language to call everything GMO. I think that's something that needs to be understood. There's no such thing like GMO as a bulk language. It's a genetic modification that is specific to a purpose. If it is drought, it will be for drought only. It will not kill any pest. If it is for Roundup tolerance, so that you can use it in weeding, all right, to just be that.
So do you have the specific name to this particular GMO maize that is a success in Brazil that you can tell us?
No, Brazil is using the Roundup maize, the one for weeding, not for pest.
Not for pest.
Yes. But in Australia, they've used one for pest, for Bt. Yes. And that was approved in 2003 by Australia and New Zealand authority.
We just read a tweet here that Australia really categorically, the Australian government declined GMO. Why should Kenya accept it?
I think that is a misplaced thinking. It's a misplaced thinking because I took my PhD in Australia, and the same laboratory where I worked is the same that did the first. You know about fragrant rice? That is the place where fragrant rice was made, because they discovered the gene that causes fragrance. And that's how fragrant rice came about. And even now, they're going into sugarcane and other products. So I think that's a misplaced hearsay, because I'm in touch with them. We do collaborative work with them. I'm aware that they're using GM products. They're actually making it within the country. So sometimes we depend on rumors by certain individuals or institutions that use rumors to cause emotions that it's only Kenya. In fact, it's not it's anywhere else.
Daktari,
that's not true.
Daktari, with due respect, I think Ruiro, the John from Ruiro asked a valid question. Is there a country that we can say with certainty that has been affected by fall armyworm that has controlled it with GM? To the best of my knowledge, I don't know any. But what is happening with the GM technology is that once you get pest resistance, for instance, you start with one gene, and then when you get pest resistance to that gene, another product is developed with two genes, and that is what's happening with cotton. There was initial resistance to the Cry1 gene, that was Bolgard1, and then because of that, they developed another Bolgard2 that has stacked genes, and here we are now even moving to Bolgard3 that has even additional genes. So what is happening with the technology, once resistance builds in and it cannot control pests anymore, they are developing another product that is more toxic, that has more genes, that is more toxic to the environment and to people. So I think as far as we are concerned, if we ask for one country where we can say had a problem with fall armyworm and had it controlled with GM products, I think we'll be hard pressed to say. But I want to say something that has been picked on by John, that the way we are managing the fall armyworm is not good. Yes. We're using very, very strong chemicals which are extremely expensive. In fact, I don't know whether farmers can make any money if they buy those chemicals themselves, because they're extremely expensive. Many county governments are ending up having to subsidize and buying these chemicals for the farmers to control fall armyworm. Organic farmers are controlling fall armyworm quite well using organic methods like fermented rabbit urine that is working very, very well. Ash, as long as it's applied at the appropriate time and at the appropriate places. So why aren't we scaling up these technologies and sharing them with people? Because these chemicals that we are going to use from agrochemical companies will go laughing all the way to the bank. But what happens to our environment? Our farmers don't use personal protective clothing. They spray those chemicals using, their normal clothing, and then we'll get people later on who are sick and have to be treated, and other diseases related to poor use or poor handling of agrochemicals. So we must understand these diseases, and where agrochemical solutions exist, let's scale them up for our farmers to use. Jane Ambuko asked a very good question. why are our legislators going to Brazil? Are they going to learn about the GM technology? Who have they gone with our technocrats? Because our technocrats will eventually be the implementers of this. It's good to understand. Brazil has had its successes with the GM technology, particularly with Roundup Ready soya, but they've also had challenges, a lot of challenges with environmental contamination from the Roundup and of their water bodies, of their water sources. So we need to be very careful with just embracing technology. We must look long term at the impacts, long term on our environment, on our health, and also on our water sources before we embrace any technology, and make sure that it's in the interest of Kenyans. What is not in the long term interest of Kenyans must be done away with completely.
All right. Let's just get a reaction before we take our callers who are hanging on the line. Could you react to what Wanjiku she's talking about?
I will certainly react. And some of these traditional methods that Wanjiku is trying to advance, some of them actually are even used in the Bible as just parables. This idea of going to the field and then broadcast the seeds, some fall on the stone, some fall on the soil, are annoyingly, they are really annoyingly rudimentary. The thinking is, and on a light note, is that when you look at the developed world, and some people like really citing them out, saying they are refusing GM, why are we accepting? It is okay. And I keep telling people that even here in Kenya, omena is not banned, and some people will not touch it. For what reason? Because food matters are about preference, availability, culture, actually eating habit, and many other things. Some people, even if you give them BT, GM maize or ugali, they won't eat it because ugali is not their thing. So to think that our food requirements are the same compared to those of the UK, probably other parts of the world, is really a fallacy. Quickly, Debarl, is that you talked about the weather patterns in Brazil and all that.
Yes.
We must appreciate that in Brazil and all this other developed world, we are talking about large-scale farming. They can actually afford to stop a particular production of whatever crop until the next season because they produce enough. In Kenya, we are small-scale farmers. And therefore, we don't have the convenience of saying that we can block this, or this is only favorable for this particular season or the other one. And again, our eating pattern is very, very, very stringent and very, very static. Stagnant in the sense that even if there is another food that is available, you won't eat it, you will go back to your default setting. Now, for us as scientists, what we are saying is that, and Wanjiku talked about it, about the resistance or breaking the resistance, Debarl, for your information, and I know you know this, I can tell you that even the hybrids, which Wanjiku doesn't have a problem with, they have to be developed every single season. Every single season. Why? Because they break. The hybrid vigor is often lost in the second season. And even those who are, say, the traditional guys who would want to keep their seeds, and the technology usually present this notion that, what about our seeds that we are keeping and the contamination from the GM and all that? I can say here that if there is a good shade of seed that is really that good and will save this country, the best actually way to keep it would even be through biotechnological platforms, because we would go into that seed, identify what are the traits that are useful in it, and keep them even as what we are calling recombinant clones or cDNA library, so that we keep it. Because you will lose these things going forward. These things will be lost. And they were appropriate then, when the population was just not so much. But now we are talking of a rising population, Debarl. We are talking about aging farmers. People who are really good farmers are aging. We are talking about the youth who don't want only white-collar jobs. They want to tweet seeds and hashtag fertilizers. And then they want to, all these things that the youth do. We must now think very strategically on how do we make production, or farming very trendy, even for the youth, in terms of making it, increase their income, let it be a trendy thing that somebody can hashtag and say, look at me, I'm a farmer. But we are losing this because we still want this youth to go to the field and broadcast the seeds.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry, before we continue with the conversation, we have callers who are hanging on the line. And we have Peter who is hanging on the line right now. Peter from Nakuru. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us this morning. You have a question or a contribution? Yes?
My contribution is
Yes, please.
the forum.
Yes, please.
We have not indeed gone to find out what is happening and what the products we have within our reach.
Yes.
I have used Artemisia annua, a product used in manufacture of drugs for control of malaria.
Yes, please.
And it has worked very well. But the promoters of that product, they only came for this malaria control. And they just manufactured and took that artemisinin to other countries to manufacture our drugs. So if we are serious with ourselves, that is a tree that can be grown by any farmer, and use it in its forearm control. This is aiding farmers. That's not our problem. Our problem is that we are subdividing this land and making it concrete desert, building houses and the right, and the prices cannot sustain any farming.
Yes.
So in the future, we have all the 30% of our land that is useful for, or potentially used for growing agriculture without water or irrigation.
Yes.
We will have concrete blocks. So that's our major worry. This idea of GMO is a wish of being here. I think those promoting it just want to make a kill.
To make a kill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter, there from Nakuru, to make a kill. And of course, he's talking about a land subdivision as well. Also, that has become a big menace when it comes to, family farming as well. Let's hear from Ochwancha, who's actually hanging on the line as well. Ochwachi, I should say, from Nyeri. Good morning, Ochwachi.
Hello, Debarl.
Yeah, hello to you. You have a question or a contribution? I'm well, thank you.
Yeah. There are two things I want to talk about. Yeah.
Please.
First of all, it's the organic.
Yes, please.
We've been living with pest all along. And pests like the aphids, controlling them organically by using ash, the wood ash.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, where is this armyworm coming from right now? We've been seeing them around, but where are they rampant at this moment? Is there another way we can control the pest alone instead of modifying the crops? And then the second thing about the GMO, you've talked about the receptors.
Yes.
Whereby the receptors, it is one receptor, only one receptor that is affected. Will it not reach a point that we'll have something like a resistance, where the receptors, more other receptors are affected by this GMO?
Yes. Thank you, Chwachi, there from Nyeri. And lastly, we have Ryan also hanging on the line. We'll take more calls as well. But for now, let's hear from Ryan calling from Makueni. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Yes, you have a question or a contribution? Thank you for joining us.
Okay, I have a question and a contribution.
Please.
First, I'm very happy. I've been following the debate and it's one of the best. But as we debate about GMO,
yes, please.
I'm thinking for a number of years we've been given Kenyans, addressing food shortage,
yes,
addressing food hunger. So I'm asking, what are we going to weigh? Are we going to weigh people dying of hunger, or we are going to weigh the debate about GMO? Because when you look about GMO, it is just genetic modification. And according to my understanding, we don't eat genes actually. So my point is, if we don't have a best alternative for corn, yes, in this case, we don't have a best alternative for corn. We have only the genetic modification organisms as the best alternative to address hunger. So I don't see why we can't buy it at the expense of dying life.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan, calling there from Makueni. And also reactions from social media. We have James Wakibia saying, but when we're talking about food safety, so that the GMO issue comes in, is it because we have no sufficient water? We've had bad soils, or because of pests? If it's water, we should address water problem. If it's soil, let's discuss soil, etc., etc. Also, we do have Samuel Orutua saying, as a country, we lack food diversity, and we are dependent on maize meal, in that if problem arises on it, it becomes an issue. But diversity in seeds is is what? It's up for the government to conduct. It's up to the government to conduct research in food production to diversify the same suitable foods for different regions. This is what Samuel Oduor is talking about. Also, we have James again saying most of his scientists have been paid. Have been paid by Monsanto to play down facts. GMOs should not be allowed. Let's invest and grow our own traditional seeds. So they'll tell us if they've been paid. That is, of course, Dr. Joel and Professor Richard Oduor as well. Also, we have Adhere Kevin saying the GMO debate hasn't been lost on facts and premised instead on human fears and speculation. I think we must strive to manage the harmful aspects while amplifying the benefits. I read this earlier. But we have one from Nyanga saying GMOs could be a good way of alleviating food shortage in Kenya. However, it has been crowded with fears, risk, and speculation. Let's address this. I read that also earlier, and we want just to address some of these concerns that you have, and of course from our callers as well, from Peter Ochwachi and Rand from Makueni. Good questions are being raised here about land subdivisions, and I know you've taken mental notes of some of these questions as well. Let's begin with Wanjiru. Some of these questions have been raised. What will be your reactions as well?
One of the reactions I pick up immediately from these questions and comments, especially from Peter and Ochwachi,
yes,
is that farmers have knowledge on how to manage pests using indigenous knowledge. For instance, I didn't even know that Peter said that he's noticed that artemisinin seems to be working on the fall armyworm. And farmers have a way of discovering these things, and what they really need is scaling up this technology, this information, into a technology that other people can use. Ochwachi also said they've been using organic control of pests for a long time in production, including ash, wood ash. And being from the organic sector, I can confirm that farmers are successfully doing this even in large scale. I like the caller who raised, I think on Twitter, that what is the real problem with production. About in 2014, a study was done, released by Egerton University, that did a soil survey in all the 47 counties.
Yes.
And what they found was that in these counties, the soils were not actually suitable for optimal maize productivity. One, they didn't have enough nutrients, and most importantly, none of the soils in the 47 counties had enough organic matter to sustain the productivity or good soil yields. So what are we saying? Our soils are sick. But yet, the solutions we are saying is in the technology. Let's bring GMOs. And yet, we are going to produce these GMOs in the same sick soils. We need to address the challenges we have with productivity. Can we have water available over and above during the rainy seasons? Small-scale farmers, we can produce if there's water available to them. Small-scale irrigation schemes like we have in Kirinyaga and Meru, but our soils are sick and they need organic matter. That should really be where we start. If we can improve our soil health, we'll find even the crops we grow are more resistant to pests and diseases, and we get better yields. So let's not try and fix the problem from other, technological solutions. Technology is good, but let's really look at the root problem, the causes of the problem we have. And I am totally convinced that we can be food secure without having genetic engineering or fixing our crops and our seeds and selling them out to multinationals to own them as their intellectual property rights.
All right.
Now, first thing, I'm a supporter.
Your reactions, then we continue, of course, looking deeper also on the multinationals and intellectual property as well. Okay,
now, my first reaction is that we need homegrown solutions.
Yeah.
And I think many will agree with me that imports are not the priority. If we can make anything locally, that's our first line.
Yes.
And that's what we do, because we are researchers. Now, that makes us at crossroads with some groups that may support importation more than homegrown solutions. And I'm very surprised that it would be imagined that, for example, Monsanto would pay us. Why would Monsanto pay their rivals? Because we are developing technology here. We're developing a local solution. Therefore, we are reducing their ability to import. So that's surprising. But now, on Wanjiru's issue, I think we need to dissect problems in farming systems. We cannot solve all problems. Some are trade policy related, infrastructure, of course water, soils, the 6 soils, which is true, and pests. I think the study she's talking about was done by the Gmos Institute.
Yeah.
I know it very well, and it's true. The soils were sick. Gmos did not say we cannot use genetic engineering. They just gave the status report on the soils. Now, that's why I was saying we need to dissect problems. The current problem is how to control the pest. So controlling the pest is part of the solution. Fixing trade policies is part of the solution. Water availability, like irrigation, the government has set up, the Galana Kukalu, which of course many say was a failure, but it did something. It didn't entirely fail. So let's have an integrated solution to these problems, and not throw away any that can help. If organic farming can help, it's welcome. I will not oppose organic farming, why not?
All right.
But then, we should not demonize the technology because there's an institution that was known to have used it earlier, like Monsanto. Because now we are talking about a locally produced BT, maize, and other products. So that does not make GM itself bad. We should just address, if we think it is unsafe, we give reasons.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we give reasons. And of course, we want to now look at the intellectual property. And of course, there was a piece also from the Daily Nation. This was in December 15th there, where we had it saying that, yes, Monsanto GMO seeds raise monopoly fears. Resistant variety leaves farmers in the U.S. worried over stranglehold on the sector. Just tucked away there, they say that the rapid growth of Monsanto's new GMO seeds resistant to the controversial herbicide, that is dicamba, the scientists will tell me, has revived worries about the company's stranglehold over the farming during a period of industry consolidation. A producer of dicamba, Monsanto, last year introduced genetically modified cotton and soybean seeds that can resist the weed killer. The products took off, amassing more than 20% of U.S. soybean fields and 50% of the U.S. cotton fields in just 2 years, according to Monsanto data. So there is this issue about intellectual property that was being raised, and these multinationals now running, of course, once they have the intellectual property. You mentioned 20 years, but of course in 20 years you can do more harm to family farming as well, when we're talking about GMOs and these seeds. First of all, issues that we need to put into perspective. We raised this on at the top of the program. We asked the question, when it comes to seed contamination, if a farmer like Wanjiku here wants to be purely organic, and across we have a farmer who's now actually having the GMOs as well, how then do you, when it comes to issue of markets, coming to the market, if I come with my produce to the market and perhaps someone wants purely organic, but they find that it has been contaminated, so to speak, with GMOs, then how do you actually pay the farmer? No. Because your farm is having the GMO seeds, our farm is having a pure organic seeds that have grown maybe and borne fruit that are healthy, but in the market now they can dictate this GMO, and it is because of a seed contamination. What is a solution to this?
What happens to GM or genetic engineering and its deployment in any country? Let's talk about Kenya. There are regulations about how it is done. You cannot just come and grow GM anywhere. If you have to grow it, there is what we call refugia. Under a regulation, refugia, there is a distance between your farm and ordinary farms. It's not something you're not just going to do on the background, right? I mean, without surveillance. It is controlled, it's a controlled process. So there's some distance that is way above the distance expected of a pollinator. So there's the least likelihood that it will pollinate the next farm. Even when it does, in the next season, it will have broken down, because it has gone to a background that is not its background.
So what are you trying to tell me? There is no seed contamination at all?
There will be
and we've
very
never
limited.
had any case.
They will be very limited.
Even in the limited cases that we have, what we're talking about limited cases, but on a larger scale, that we find my seeds have been contaminated, even if they. So that is not total control. If there's a limited cases, then you're not having a foolproof control on how seed contamination can come to the market.
Well, there's a traceability issue, and there's testing. But what you're saying, we are talking about two neighbors, one growing GM, the other one is growing non-GM.
Yes.
That distance separating them will try to limit any possibility of cross-pollination, because the distance above the pollinator movement But in the event,
no, make me
in
understand.
the event it happens.
No, make me understand. You cannot control insects. They
Yes.
fly. You cannot control birds.
I
Even
think-
if there is a distance, you
Yes.
cannot control the insects that are there to coming to my farm,
Yes.
or what is really happening, or maybe there's a migration. Yeah,
Okay.
that will also contaminate the seeds as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm not the scientist. You are guys.
Debarl,
What you-
probably, let me just weigh in on this point.
Please. Yeah.
You know, when we talk here and talk GMO, it's like we have stigmatized that word GMO, that it is really bad. Can I break it down for you?
Please make me
Debarl,
understand.
when you are eating ugali and beans, you are eating carbohydrates and proteins, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, when you are eating those two, do you go in the plate of beans and try to identify, remove the DNA, because they have cells in there? Do you remove them? Because when they get into your mouth, you're mixing those DNA. They are in there. Do you wake up the following morning with leaves of maize and beans on you? What happened to those DNAs that you ate? We ate fish. Are we having scales? And some of us, like Luos, we've been eating fish for years. Do we have scales? We should be seeing those. Let me break it down, just for you understanding what we do in biotechnology. If, for example, right now, there was a real serious threat to beans in the country, such that we are not getting optimal levels
Yes.
of production, what we would do, we would come as biotechnologists and ask one single question. What exactly do we want in beans? Then you realize we only need proteins from them. Is that true? Proteins don't just pop up in beans. They are guided by the genes in the genome of the beans. So what a biotechnologist like me would do, I would get into the cells of the DNA, which you are already eating anyway, identify that section that actually encodes for that protein that we enjoy, and then move it to maize and place it in the kernels. Because we have that ability, you don't place it in the roots because nobody eats the roots. You don't put it on the leaves so that it is in the kernel. What that means is that you are eating maize, which also has got the proteins which naturally you are eating. Number two, also, we need to start thinking about this organicness of the one we talk about. Are you aware that even the non-GM, and Wanjiku will say this, if you spray them and you do all those kind of stuff on them, they are not organic? Is that true?
That's true.
And now in biotechnology, actually, you can also have these seeds and grow them organically without adding any pest. Actually, it's the best because, for example, the BT maize, we are picking it from a bacteria that they eat in salads. So they already eat that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then now maize, they already, we already eat that.
I think-
Actually, if you take that DNA and put it in maize so that you have a BT maize, which you are not spraying heavily like they do in the normal farming, you are actually eating organic stuff that are not actually subjected to some of these things. Biotech is not this thing, and that is why when we talk about contamination, you get a feeling that we are taking a monster from this point, placing them there. No, we address just problems and with things that are already existing.
Daktari, I need to clarify a few things. Number one, if it is prohibited in organic standards to use genetically engineered seeds, because in organic farming, we support what is natural. And the difference between genetically modified pardon me, seed is that scientists have gone in the seed and altered the DNA and included something that was not normally in the DNA of, say, maize or cotton.
Yes.
That is why it's genetically engineered. It's not natural. And you know, let's think about this for a change. Look at children with Down syndrome. The reason children have Down syndrome is because something went wrong with one gene in the DNA. And the result was they got an extra chromosome, and the children have Down syndrome. You know, a scientist was sharing this with me. Look at maize, not maize, rice, and human beings. If you look at the total number of genes we have almost similar number of genes with rice. A scientist was sharing this with me not so long ago. The total number of genes we have, the difference between human beings and rice is very few number of genes. But look at the complexity of a human being and the complexity of rice. We are worlds apart. Because the interaction of those genes make us who we are and make rice what rice is. So what are we saying? This tinkering with genes and changing them, when they get into our systems, and in a Canadian study it was shown that mothers who consume GMOs, actually those genes are passing on through their uterus into the fetuses. It's been confirmed by a Canadian study. So these altered genes, when they get to my DNA, what impact will they cause? Recently in science, doctors are saying that in the last 10 to 20 years,
Yes.
they have seen the highest rise of autism in the US. And they think it's linked to the commercialization of GM food because they eat GM corn in their foods as an additive or as a food. GMOs are already available, and GM soya is already available in the US market. And the rise in autistic children has grown as they commercialize the GM crops more and more. So what are we saying? Scientists make it look simple that they just changed a gene and added something. But the complexity of interaction with genes and what it can result in our systems is what we are questioning, and we are saying, stop. Can we understand this technology better before we include it in our food? Already our food system has so many challenges.
Yes.
If we look at the pesticide residues in our foods, the traceability in our foods, we never know where our food came. If we now add in genetically modified food that is so complex to understand and to follow through in terms of traceability, we will be lost in terms of managing our challenges with health and in our food system. So we are saying, can we stop and understand this technology a little bit more,
Yes,
and embrace other ways of being food secure that don't have the challenges that genetically engineered crops have? So let's not make it look simple. The interaction of genes is something that we have never fully understood, and I'm sure the scientists here will tell us it's never been totally understood,
Right, so
how genes interact.
So the scientists here also, maybe they've done a very sucky job in terms of making sure that public is aware on this GMO debate, sensitization and awareness. So do you agree with what also Wanjiku is saying in terms of sensitization? You've done a poor job.
Yeah, without some job.
Yeah, no, you've done a poor job. We don't truly understand. Even the reactions that we have here on social media still, it really goes to show that, yes, there is lack of understanding of what GMO is all about. If I may pick one or two, like Anastasia Olembo, she's saying, I think the fears are genuine. Technocrats and scientists should address this in the best interest of Kenyans. That, it seems, you've not really done. The question will be again, now that we don't understand GMO, Kenya is also considering branching into the genome editing technology, right? To improve cassava, yam, bananas production. And we have also the National Biosafety Authority saying that it was processing an application from an international agency seeking permission to introduce the technology also known as virus-induced gene silencing. Genome editing is a new farming technology that still, even if we introduce this, and of course, I really wanted also Dorrington to be here from the National Biosafety Authority. Of course, the authority could not be here because they are committed also today in a meeting. But it will have been very nice also to have the authority just to bring into perspective. In terms of sensitization, we are going full steam ahead to another genome editing. We don't understand the GMO itself. I think you're piling Kenyans with so much information still, or things happening with this particular debate. Even the task force that was there, we've never gotten any report maybe put up to the public for people to understand what really came out from this particular task force. And I know Dr. Joel, you're sitting in this particular task force. Why are you? Why are you there?
Many of us pulled out right from the beginning.
You pulled out?
Many of us pulled out right from the beginning, even the CEO of NBA.
Why did you pull out from the task force?
The issue is that, for your information, and I think it's better Kenyans know this.
Yes, please.
The task force that was purportedly set up by Honorable Macharia in 2013,
yes,
around September, was set up once the report was already, there was a report that was ready.
There was a report that was ready?
Ready, submitted, and I have a copy. So a task force is being set up when there's a ready report. So when you realize such kind of thing, what business does a scientist of credibility have to do with such a group?
So the task force that you had,
the task force that was formed.
That was formed. Did you do any work?
Well, we attended.
You attended?
Yes, but we attended to give our views. But when we realized that the report was ready, and I have a copy, while they were collecting public opinion, they had a ready report. And I can prove that because I have a copy.
You have a copy of that report?
Yes, I do.
Maybe he needs to share with us.
So that issue already showed that this was hogwash.
Okay. So what was really encapsulated on that particular report? And
yes.
They'd gone to the public, they were paid money,
yes.
The sitting allowance was paid.
Money
from
taxpayers.
There was no report from taxpayers.
Yes.
No money, no particular report emanated from that particular task force.
Actually, the reason why that report cannot be made public is that we brought a counter copy that predates the task force.
The task force.
Yes, so they're in a quagmire, they don't know what to do.
Okay, so You see, there's a lot of gray areas, ominous cloud hanging over us as far as GMO is concerned.
So now to clarify about that,
yes,
is that the truth is that the debate about GMO, sorry to use that singular term GMO, which means several things, but the story about GMO and the debate in Kenya is a trade debate.
It's a trade debate.
Yes, it's not a safety debate.
It's not a safety debate.
No. It's a
but
trade
there's safety
debate.
concerns, you must say.
Yeah, there are some safety concerns, and it's genuine for any Kenyan or any other person to have a concern about anything, and that should be addressed in the context in which it comes. We cannot wash away what people, concerns that citizens are raising, because even when we make these crops or the products, they are meant for the people. So they have a right to make some concerns. But the debate at that higher level is a trade debate. People are losing money. Some are getting money, and people are protecting their turf. So you will see that there are people who would champion for importation, even within government. There are people who would prefer that the same GMO that's bad, that is so bad that we cannot even be allowed to do field trials, can be imported into the country. It's so dangerous that you cannot test it on your farms under confinement, but then we can import it. Are you seeing that kind of paradox? So it's a trade issue.
It's a trade issue. Of course, there are scientific evidence showing that it contributes to trade imbalance.
Yeah.
That it favors the rich nations and their multinational corporations while disadvantaging the small-scale farmers, family farming that we were talking about. For the BT maize, GMO create food insecurity and marginalization of the small-scale farmers and a threat to their livelihoods. We had a case that we just mentioned before we took a short break. Burkina Faso, with the cotton failure, is an excellent example. Could you explain to Kenyans to know what happened in Burkina Faso?
I first want to
yes,
to refute what Dr. is saying here. I think there are many players in this whole debate on GMOs. But those of us who work with farmers and farming organizations, it's not purely a trade debate. It's about people's control of their indigenous seed, of their seed. Because once you have a seed that's genetically modified, and now we are moving into our indigenous seed, cowpeas, sorghums, I think there's GM arrowroots, not arrowroots, but sweet potatoes. There's now GM banana coming up in Uganda. It's about our food sovereignty. To what extent do we have control over the food we eat as a people, of our seed? Because the minute a seed is genetically modified, it ceases to belong to the community of farmers, the community of Kenyans. It now belongs to a corporate entity. For the next 20 years, they are going to own that seed. Yet those cowpea seeds and the varieties have for a long time have been in the hands of farmers who've owned them collectively as communities. So it's not just about a trade debate at a corporate level. It's about a people's ownership and right to their own seed and seed sovereignty. And number two, it's about a people's right to know the food they are eating.
Yes.
Like Dr. said, when I eat my maize, I don't stop to think what this maize is mixed with what. I take it for granted that it's purely maize that has been crossed with another variety of maize to form maybe a superior breed. The minute I start thinking it could have rat genes, it could have baboon genes, it could have pig genes in it, then it ceases to be, I have to think twice about the food I'm eating.
Yes.
And this is what scientists are doing.
Yeah, and
just because if you put pig genes or rat genes or wherever it becomes resistant to something, they make it seem okay. It's not.
Wanjiku raises a very good question.
Yeah,
because
I would want to
in the issue of packaging, because as a consumer, I have the right to know the contents of what I'm actually pursuing.
Yeah.
I mean, consuming. If I buy maybe bananas that they have been genetically modified, right? Don't I have the right to know from the packaging the contents?
Yes, you do have, and that is why.
And that is not happening in the market.
No,
it's happening.
It does happen.
This has been
But we have a labeling regulation.
this has been a big debate also in the US when it comes to declaring some of the contents that yes we do have in particular products with the packaging.
let me tell you,
we've
Debarl,
not seen this in Kenya. At least I'm not privy to any that yes.
Debarl,
What should and if Wanjiku can actually help me on this as well.
Yeah.
Debarl, actually, if you see any of the GMOs in the shelves right now, we will need to sue those guys, because as we are talking, there is a ban, on GMO importation and consumption. So you are not likely to see any. So that's the position as it is.
Is the testing being done?
And that is why we are, and also in Kenya we are actually moved ahead. We have even the labeling regulation, so that you go and see that it has got, it's genetically modified. And as we talk about genetic modification, it's so easy to say that we are bringing pigs genes, we are bringing, monkey genes and all this. What are we looking in the monkeys? Seriously. We have no business with monkeys at all. We must start, and Debarl, let me tell you why I feel sometimes very emotional about
it is just an expression.
I
don't think...
No, I understand. But let me tell you, in medicine, the drug that we are currently using for Ebola, this disease, actually it has got 3 proteins, and it is being developed in a transgenics, a GMO tobacco. And Wanjiru is not on street. When we talk about insulin, we are using, recombinant or GMO bacteria. Wanjiru is not on the street for insulin. There is Gaucher's disease, where one of the drugs called elalisol. We are expressing them in transgenic carrot cells. Those are plants. Wanjiru is not on the street. So sometimes I begin to wonder, when you take drugs, Debarl, sometimes you're told this is a drug for X disease, and the following are side effects, documented and even written. You still go ahead and take the drug with known documented side effects. What guides you? And you are very hesitant to take GMO with imaginary and documented sort of, illusions. So when you start discussing this GM thing, first of all, we need to get the public to know that GM is as basic as just mixing beans and maize in your mouth, mix those DNA there. And when you're saying, what is the interaction of the genes? Even right now, if there will be interaction of those genes in your body, they should happen even now. We eat maize, we eat beans, we eat all these things. We eat BT, for example, from salads. It's already eaten. So does it only change to interact when now you use it to help you increase the production? And let me tell you, Debarl, this is why it's important. When Wanjiru says that we need to stop the technology, I want to ask you a question. Assuming we all say, because soon we might decide to now go start doing matatu business as scientists, because we are not given opportunity now to perform what we should do. How will, assuming we say no GM as it is, how will this country protect itself against those GMs that they don't really want? You must have us here. We have a right to do serious research, including this genome editing. And people don't understand that even in our universities, biotechnology is one of the high-ranking courses. We are training thousands of graduate students with A's from KCSEs. And they get to the university to train them. Now we come here and stop or through a ban. I wonder what we are doing to our students. We are paid hefty salaries, and now I would say hefty, much as we are on strike. I would say hefty. Because why would a government pay us, really, to train people on things that kill them?
You're paid hefty and you're here. Striking.
No, in quotes. Of course, I said on a light note. On a light note. So what I mean, anyway, is that we must understand that the government has now gotten tired with these negative comments on GM. Actually, within the Big Four, and Debarl, you know this, food security is really pivotal in that. And actually, that is why, as we are talking right now, NRF has funded 4 research on GMO in a lab that I had at Kenyatta University. And it's the only one in public universities around in East and Central Africa. Right. Yeah. We are bringing even people from outside to get to know this technology, because other people around us, including Sudan, are already picking this technology.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I think I'll just give you also 30 seconds to give us your closing remarks. We start with you, Wanjiku. You've not really clarified on the task force, the report. Where is the report? And if there are issues with the report, why should we even be having this debate in the first place? Right? Because we've not had any report recommendations from that particular report. They need to come to Kenyans and tell us we pay them taxes. What have they been doing with this particular, gallivanting about taking opinions from Kenyans? Yet there was no debate, there was no any concrete report that was tabled, because there was a report that you say predated that particular task force itself. So it beats the purpose in the first place. We should not even be thinking about genome editing first of all, before we have proper research on this. We're not really doing away with the technology. technology. We just want to get an understanding of what we're embracing.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give your closing remarks there.
Just one or two things about this report. We made inputs into this task force when they went round.
Yes.
And our suspicion as a community who feel strongly against genetic engineering that the committee or the recommended that we embrace a precautionary principle, and that's what we feel it may have been a recommendation from this report, and that's why it has not gone public, because people who want the technology to be out in the market don't want these findings to come out. That's what we suspect. But I think I would challenge Dr. here to share with us the report. But as I come to make my own closing comments, NEMA has made a call for people who have to send in comments if they have questions, comments, or feel strongly about national performance trials for BT cotton. There are proposed trials in 9 sites.
Yes.
And I would urge Kenyans of goodwill who have strong views around not having BT cotton in Kenya based on its failure in India, South Africa, and more recently Burkina Faso, where it has been banned. They are not growing BT cotton anymore, to send their views to NEMA by the 13th, which is tomorrow, and make sure that their views are sent to NEMA. The information is available on their website.
Thank you.
And finally, let's embrace agroecology. For us to go forward and to face the challenges of the future, we need diversity in our biodiversity, in our food, and that's how we are going to be resilient.
Thank you. Thank
not
you
by minimizing our food supply and our food sources.
Right, let's hear from
in 30 seconds, I would tell Kenyans, one, to embrace the President's initiative of improving food security through modern farming systems and other policy-related issues. Two, that crop failures result from non-observance of best practices and not because it's GM. We have had crop failures even in Kenya without growing any GM food. And that we have a labeling regulation in Kenya that separates GM products from non-GM, and Kenyans have a choice to make because we don't compel anybody to take what they don't want to take. Finally, that we are well-intentioned people. We live in Kenya. We eat from here. There is no way I can vouch for anything that can kill anybody, because where will I get my food from? So we should trust each other. We should trust our local systems more than foreign ideas, so that local solutions and locally made GM products should take precedence over imports. And so we hope that farmers are waiting. We'll conduct the national performance trial, and the seeds will be available to them very soon, in the next one year, 8 months. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we demand, as Kenyans, right, to know what this report is all about.
Sure.
We want the 2 reports, and actually the public should be made aware of what actually was in the first report and what is in the second report, and what is really happening, of course, with the whole task force.
I can tell the public what is in the report now.
Yes, please.
Briefly,
as we're winding up, because of my director, she's on my case.
Well, the report, in summary, says that we should embrace technology while taking safeguards under what she called precautionary principle, and that GM should be judged on case-by-case basis. We should not lump them and call them GMOs.
That was your report.
No, that's the task force report.
But we know there were 2 reports.
Yeah, I'm saying there was a report that was ready, but the same task force before it was.
So which report are we embracing as Kenyans?
The 2 reports are the same. They mirror of each other, yeah.
So okay, let's hear from
Debarl, my
Professor
parting shot
Oduor.
is that we need to appreciate that technology usually has a span, and therefore we must move away from over-debating technologies. The Green Revolution saved Asia, and when it came, and when we in the developing countries started to actually benefit from it, we had a new baby in the in the building called carbon credit and environmental pollution, and that's now a problem. We now have biotechnology, which was out in 1996, 20 years ago.
Yes.
We are here still debating it. We are now moving from that to genome editing. We've not even benefited from biotech. We didn't benefit from the Green Revolution. Now, at what point will we as developing countries understand that technologies have, lifespan, and we must take advantage when they're still really applicable? For that reason, I want to tell Kenyans that, look, we have the requisite institutions to safeguard our environment.
Thank you.
We have the capacity, we have the human capital. Please enjoy your plate of GMO. It's okay.